Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Save Your Money and Stop the Waste, Cloud Cost Optimization for Multi-Cloud. This event is presented in partnership with our friends at Taos, which is an IBM company. Thank you so much for joining us. As more and more companies utilize cloud computing, what they find is that there's a whole lot of waste, and we'll be learning on this event exactly how you can optimize your cloud costs. If you've got challenges around cloud cost optimization, you're in the right place. Now, before you get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want this to be an educational event, and we encourage your questions there in the questions pane. We even have a best question prize, which I'll be talking about here in just a moment. We'll be taking your questions live at the end of the event, but keep those questions coming throughout the discussion. We also have a number of resources there in the Handouts tab, including a special offer from Taoss that you don't want to miss. At the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. And as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize. If you ask the best question on the event today, you'll win a Visa $50 gift card. Prize winners will be selected and contacted after the event. All winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy. All right, so with that, it's now time to turn on our face-to-camera video, and we're going to have a live chat here with our experts from Taoss. Here we go. I'm excited now to introduce you to today's expert presenters. Welcome, Bharat, Steve, and Lindsey from Taoss. Why don't you each tell us a little bit about your background, starting with you, Bharat.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Bharat Badrinath, and I run up product marketing here at Taoss. I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years and have worked at NetApp, EMC, Oracle, and Riverbed, and among other companies. For those of you who are not familiar with Taoss, we have been helping customers with their toughest DevOps and cloud challenges, transformation challenges for over 30 years. We have over 4,000 customers who we have helped them through their journey to help them with their toughest challenges. That's why our motto, our tagline is "What's next?" helping them solve for what's next in the hybrid multi-cloud world. On to you, Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Wheet. I'm a senior principal consultant with Taoss Professional Services. I've been with Taoss for 7 years, and I have over 25 years of experience in the IT industry. I specialize in cloud computing, specifically with cloud architecture and automation. My primary focus is infrastructure as code and DevSecOps, as well as landing zone, cloud policies, and security designs, basically well-architected designs. Let me also introduce Lindsey from Customer Success. Hey, Lindsey, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, I'm Lindsey Turner, and I manage Taoss's Customer Success organization. I've been with Taoss for nearly 3 years and previously working in SaaS customer success. At Taoss, our team of experienced customer success managers partner with our managed services customers to ensure excellence in service delivery and maximize the value of the Taoss partnership for our clients.
Excellent. Well, this is really exciting. I'm excited to kick this off now. Let's talk about this statistic that up to 30% of cloud spend is just being wasted out there. Can you break down what's really happening in the industry, Bharat?
Yeah, sure thing. I think everybody will agree cloud is mainstream today. Every customer is deployed in one or more clouds, and they're adopting cloud at an incredible pace. They're trying to get the agility benefits, the transformational benefits that cloud offers to them. And every year, there is a firm, Flexera, which publishes a survey of 700 to 800 customers on what is the state of the cloud. And you will notice that one stat, which is more or less consistent across the board for the last 3-4 years, has been the amount of spend that customers believe is being wasted in the cloud. Wasted in the sense of over-provisioned resources which they're paying for but not using, getting the wrong size of resources and such. And that has been around 30% for the last 3 years. Yes, it is coming down from 33, 34%, and this year has been at 30%. And you'll also notice that over 60% of companies want to address this problem. They want to address this wastage, if you will, because then they can reinvest it in other innovation projects or deploy more workloads in the cloud. If only they had the right guardrails, the right protection, the right governance, it'll help them control their spend and make their cloud usage even more efficient and powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge percentage, 30% out there. Lindsay, I'm curious, what are some of the examples of this, the overspending and waste that you're seeing out in the field?
Sure. One example is we have a large luxury retail customer who has a multi-cloud environment, and their environment is growing and it's complex. There isn't a clear limit on who can deploy resources, so people sign up for things or spin up VMs and maybe they forget about signing up for it or move on from the role even. It becomes a free-for-all, and within that complex environment, it can be challenging to identify where your spend is out of control or doesn't need to be as high as it is. I think customers are just challenged with understanding where the spend is going and, most important, the value for that spend.
Yeah, I love that, Lindsay. In fact, the value is the key part here, right? Spend by itself is not nearly as exciting as what are you getting for it in return. If you're ending up spending it on things which are not adding value to your organization, then you will categorize them as waste, right? If you're spinning up VMs, you're spending more with VMs that you're not using, you're spending more on egress, and on storage that you're not using, where you can use efficiencies to reduce that spend. Now it becomes a really interesting conversation with customers, because when they sign up for it, it feels like a small amount, but then it all adds up. And in aggregate, you don't have a process to see how much you're spending on useful stuff and how much on waste. So you need to have a process to do so.
Another example I see a lot of is one-to-one sizing and scaling going on from on-prem to cloud. It's easy for people to say, yes, absolutely, I want the fastest premium storage out there. And oh, by the way, my on-prem was 16 CPUs and 64 gigs of RAM. So they try and mimic that. We especially see this when transforming to PaaS services, which should be scaled and sized a lot differently than straight IaaS instances. A lot of time the requests come directly from vendor requirements. And as you know, vendors are going to ask for huge amounts of resources. I've seen them ask 2 to 3 times more than what they really need. Of course, this is to ensure that they don't get the calls from the client saying, hey, it's slow. It can be a laborious task to push back on these vendor requirements. Instead, a better method is to create them with the vendor requirements and then monitor these systems. Then when you see them wasting the resources, you can scale them back with justification.
So organizations are ending up with these oversized systems or with resources that just don't get shut down. So what do you think are really the core issues that are driving these kinds of situations, Stephen?
People have a tough time understanding the difference between performance testing versus functional testing. They'll spin up systems larger than what they need in non-prod because they think they need to match the production environments exactly. This is something we help with our clients with all the time. Functional testing asks the simple question, does it work? This has nothing to do with how fast it works or what load it can handle. On the other hand, performance testing should be done in its own environment that is spun up and tore down as needed. That's the environment that should mimic your production environment. After the load testing and performance testing is done, it should be torn down and not used for day-to-day development. Also, a big part of the problem is that the people that are requesting and using resources in non-prod do not normally control those resources. Dev teams might be the one requesting the VM or the PaaS service, but they usually don't have any control of the provisioning or management of those resources. Building code is hard, and application teams just want to build and deploy code. They don't want to manage the infrastructure and everything that entails. It's not their concern. It's not their responsibility. That's where other teams in the organization need to come in and help. App developers are worried about their applications, not the infrastructure, and rightfully so. It's not their job.
Absolutely. It's really coordinating those teams. What's the policy or strategy for going back and making sure things are the correct size for what you need? For example, we have a customer where the applications and development teams have carte blanche for creating resources as they need with little governance. They are concerned about performance more than cost. And in cases like that, something as simple as applying a strategy of who should be able to deploy resources and ensuring there is simplicity to that hierarchy can help attribute cost back to something specific. I think that can be a tough task for our customers. Where was that cost accrued and what's the value of that spend? Was it for a critical system? Estimating and qualifying the cost is a part of the problem.
Lindsey, you totally hit the nail on its head. In fact, as Stephen was saying, and as you were saying, building code by itself is very hard, and given the new time frames that they are expected to build the code in and the quality that they need to build it in, it is extremely improbable to expect the developer to be responsible for the cost overruns that they see. In fact, one of the analysts at Gartner, Lydia Leong, says this kind of wastage in the cloud is truly business leadership failure, right? The business leadership needs to find the right processes, the right structures, which allows the developers to do what they do best, which is build quality code in the timeframes, while there is the right process and governance, which helps them be fast, but also cost conscious. So you automate a lot of those with the right processes in place.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, how does an organization actually realize that it's in this situation, and what are the benefits of addressing it?
Yeah, David, let me take your second question first, right? It's straightforward. What's the benefit of addressing this problem? Well, they get to save money, which currently is going waste, and reinvest it in different areas, which will help them innovate faster, improve the top line, improve the bottom line, the usual things which businesses try to accomplish, right? In fact, every hyperscaler also helps customers to make sure that they're not wasting these, because they want their customers to be happy. So it's in everybody's best interest that we don't waste the resources as customers move to the cloud. Now, to your first question, how do organizations realize that they're in this situation? Usually they get this shock when they get their first bill, which is dramatically different than their last bill, right? So that's when they wake up and they start looking at what is going on. Then they quickly realize they may need more resources, more people, more expertise, which will help them dig into this problem better. And again, it's all at the end of the day to help them invest in the right places. As we get into Christmas shopping, one of the common problems we have customers facing is retailers, for example, they see a spike in their production environment as more customers go to place their orders. If they're able to free up resources from development, which are not being used, which are wrongly provisioned, they can apply it to their production instances and without having a cost overrun. Stephen, I'm sure you've seen this at customers. What are your thoughts on this?
Definitely. I mean, to me, this is done in two parts. First, how do we identify how much waste you have and where that waste is? And second, once you found the waste, how do you fix it? Right? And more importantly, how do you prevent it in the future? The second part is critical and most of the time overlooked. It's what I call a corrective action followed by a preventative action. Management most of the time doesn't realize how much they're wasting. You can use some sample scripting to go out there and grab basic performance metrics using native cloud tools, and 20 to 30% of the time, you can find some stuff that isn't sized correctly and then try to remediate it. But this is a manual process and it takes a lot of time. To get the big gains, you need to do detailed analysis of numerous metrics on multiple levels using different sampling rates over various timeframes for a really good picture and overall health of your system. From that, you can usually find a lot of waste and a lot of opportunities for cost reduction. There are various tools out there that can help perform these tasks and help identify the waste by proactively monitoring your systems. The biggest change you can make is get into a regular auditing cycle of your environments with those tools that can show you where the waste is. And if you add automation to help implement the changes that are recommended by those tools, it can make a huge difference month to month. The cloud is a very dynamic system, and most people take the approach that, hey, once it's built and working, don't touch it. But we encourage you to break away from that line of thinking and look at it instead as being much more dynamic, and not in a monthly time frame, but instead in a weekly, daily, and even hourly increment. Right? With that change perspective, you can possibly start scaling those systems in real time or close to real time manner.
Exactly, Stephen. We find some of our clients saying our system works great, so no problem here. But a customer has brought us their bill before for their cloud spend and said, yikes, this is higher than I expected. And upon further review, it's from a lower environment. And Taoss advised on where to right size. This is common, where lower environments are built up more than they need to be matching production, when they could get away with less in QA, for example. Following review, the takeaway was to put the lower environment could still perform at a quarter of the size, and right sizing could result in some material savings. The real question is, who does the audits of those environments, and whether the client has the bandwidth or even the skill set. That can be a place to start.
So I'm curious, who should be watching out for waste and really keeping cloud spend in check? Lindsey?
It's a good question. Typically an infrastructure team manages this, but it needs to work in concert with the applications team. But your applications team shouldn't necessarily be the people controlling cost. Usually we're seeing reactive measures, so predictive analysis needs to be better. Stephen, what are you seeing?
Ultimately, it rolls up to the CIO, whether it's billed back to a business unit or not. By the time it gets to that level, it's already too late and the money's already been spent. It needs to happen before it reaches that level, whether at a business unit or even a project level, and with somebody watching it and monitoring it actively. Look, no one wants to be the bad cop and say no. In the past, the infrastructure team usually had to take on that role in the on-prem environments because it was always a battle of resource constraints and trying to make it fit or make the resources last. With cloud, that all went away, but then sprawl happened because there wasn't anybody pumping the brakes anymore. To prevent sprawl, the people who are asking for the resources need to know what it's going to cost. The problem is, most of the time, the approvers don't truly know what their cost is or even how to look up the current spend. And it's a huge systematic problem. This is a major cause of bill shock. So there are at least three things you should be doing to enable your staff to help track their spending. One, real-time auditing daily. Current spend needs to be available at the time managers are approving requests. Monthly reporting just doesn't cut it. It's too slow. It needs to be at least at a week to week or even better day to day when working in agile frameworks. Second, costing analysis for ongoing cost and forecasting tools. This is so they know what the change will be when they're adding to existing spend as part of their approval process. And third, triggers and alerts for spending. Here's the thing to remember. On-prem was normally a shared resources model, and as such, defining costs across compute and networking and storage, it was harder. And not to mention if you throw licensing and other things in there. But cloud resources can be quantified down to the penny on an hourly basis and then grouped and tagged and made reportable to get a running cost on everything. This should be leveraged heavily.
You're right, Stephen. In fact, nobody wants to and willingly waste money, right? But unless they do an assessment and have these processes in place, they won't know where the savings will come from.
Yeah, a lot of companies are playing a dangerous game out there. Imagine if I've got a bunch of like Amex Black cards and I've handed one out to each of my kids. With auditing and real-time reporting, I can see those charges on a daily basis and I can forecast what my bill will be well ahead of time and cut them off before the bill ever gets there. If I don't watch them, I may get a bill that makes me want to weep, right? So, but right now, most people just wait for the bill at the end of the month and hope the kids didn't buy a car or a boat or, a small island in the Bahamas. So you have to really pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's a powerful analogy. I like that. So I'm curious, what makes multi-cloud particularly challenging for maintaining controls?
So many customers are new to multi-cloud. It can feel more complex and harder to understand how all the pieces fit together, let alone understanding the underlying cost and where you can optimize across systems and across clouds.
Lindsey, I totally agree on this. This can be overwhelming at times. How they quantify costs across multiple different clouds for licensing, services, storage, general compute dramatically changes between clouds, and they change pricing on a daily or even hourly basis. For some things it's simple apples to apple comparison across different clouds, but others aren't. VM pricing is pretty easy to compare, but other cloud unique services aren't. It's a labor intensive process tracking all of those changes. Costing tools can be complicated to use, and they only work best for ballpark figures on basic services. It's not always cut and dry. It's like comparing grocery stores. A lot of the products can be compared apples to apples, right, at all the stores. But then there are services that aren't as easily compared. Things like, hey, does it have a deli, or does it have the exact brand I want, or am I going to have to substitute something out and make do? Oh, by the way, is there a bank branch in there, right? How close is it to my house? Does it have everything I want? And if not, is it worth my time and effort to go to two places instead of just one? Cost, while important, shouldn't be the only thing in that comparison.
Excellent point, Stephen. So with cloud technologies evolving and just advancing constantly, keeping track of best of breed products is really a project in itself. So how does that add to the challenge of managing resources?
Yeah, great question. This is always a moving target and can be really challenging. Each cloud has its specialties targeted at specific types of workloads or services. In my experience, I've rarely seen the same workload spread across multiple different clouds providers at the same client, right? We usually see one primary provider for the bulk of their workloads. And then the only time other clouds are used is when there's a highly specific workload that just isn't supported well by the primary cloud provider. It's always about cost and bang for the buck, but this can be a trap. It's more than just who's got the cheapest price. You have to think about overall flow of the application and its dependencies, WAN latency from applications sitting not next to each other. Think exponentially when workloads are separated over clouds and regions. If you only go for the cheapest cost, that can bite you. Complexity is also a problem. When navigating multi-cloud strategies, you also have to think about a cohesive strategy around tooling and monitoring, reporting, and even security. Time is money. Sometimes the savings just aren't worth the effort.
I agree. Our customers are busy folks, and I think for many, tackling the nuances of the problem can be an uphill climb. It takes time to do a cost-benefit analysis, let alone implement the changes. Where do they start?
Yeah, right on, Lindsey. In fact, you summarized it really well. This is a change. It's a change management process that needs to be put in place because they're not used to this method. You need to find the right ways to automate it so it becomes natural as they navigate this change, right? And having done many change management offers and processes before, it's pretty evident that this is a combination of people, process, and technology. If you just focus on technology, you're not going to find the right results. You need to help educate people, bring in the right skill sets who can manage this. Like Stephen was saying, once you're in the agile world, you need to make sure you have ability to track this down on a minute by minute, hour by hour, so you can keep track of it. You need to automate those, and you need to put the process in place so you don't face the same problem 6 months down the line.
Bharat, is this kind of cost optimization a one-time thing for companies?
Yeah, totally leading the witness here, but of course it is not, because you could get your cost optimized and for now, but you will find this problem occur again and again if you don't look at this as change management, where you are putting in the right processes and ensuring that this is automated and the solution is easy for folks to use. Otherwise, you're going to see that finger pointing happening like now, because at the end of the day, you can't blame the developers for cost overruns, because their goal is to get code out as quickly as possible with the highest quality. They aren't paying the bill. So I think it all comes back to how do you make this into a process?
Great point. Great point. So now let's talk about the methods to control waste and to limit this spending. I'm curious, Lindsey, what strategies do you recommend? And are there any best practices that you can share with us?
Sure. Organizations can choose whatever technology fits their needs best, but the recommendation is the same across those technologies. I see it as a two-part strategy. First, governance, and second, organizational best practices. Limit who can do what. It should not be a free-for-all. There needs to be some scalable way of auditing and a strategy for optimizing costs.
Yeah, in fact, to add on to that, your point around governance, the governance should help people transform from the old world to the new world, right? Like when I say old world, I'm talking about on premises, where they had proper hierarchy of approvals, right? Where everybody had a spend limit, and anything above that spend limit, their manager or the manager's manager would approve it. In the new world, which is in the cloud, multi-cloud world, it is a lot easier to provision resources and request resources, because it all starts small. Where you look at VM pricing, it's by the minute or by the hour. And when you look at it as an aggregate over the year, it becomes a pretty large spend, right? So they need to have the right processes, the right governance on, like you said, Lindsey, about who can deploy these resources, who can ask for resources, what resources can they ask for depending on what their job role is. And that's where the governance needs to help them, right? The processes and automation needs to help them. And Stephen, you want to talk about the second point that Lindsey highlighted, the organizational best practices?
Yeah, to mature your cloud strategy, you need to have an effective way of cost reporting and cost optimization, right? And they should be thinking about best practices for costing and reporting earlier rather than later. You know, there are 5 key areas that we look at when creating best practices for cost optimization. Whether you're running a single cloud or multi-cloud, these strategies or best practices will help you control spend. You know, one, it's control and monitor your non-production environments. Non-production environments need to be tightly controlled and monitored in the same way as production. This is because we tend to see the most waste in non-production. You need to be looking at ways to save that you wouldn't necessarily do in production. You know, this can include things like enforcement of limits on resources, what types of resources can be provisioned or what SKUs, leveraging things like spot instances or forcing shutdowns and teardowns outside of working hours. Also, just-in-time provisioning for development and testing. You know, different types of lower performing systems when they're only doing functional testing but not performance testing. Second, review and minimize redundancy and resilience. Redundancy and resilience in non-prod versus prod environments must be managed differently between those environments. Dev environments should be structured in a way to only meet the minimum viable requirements to complete functional testing. Close attention should be paid to the differences between prod and non-prod for requirements on things like node counts, node sizes, level of redundancy, as well as the level of HA. The scale of non-prod systems should be put under scrutiny to ensure waste isn't happening. What we see commonly is multiple dev environments and other low environments being used for parallel development tracks. And we tend to see a lot of duplication in those systems and data. And most of the time, those are greatly oversized or not tiered correctly.
Stephen, I'm curious, do you see a lot of duplication across clouds?
Yeah, it's a good question. Multi-cloud strategies, we tend not to see cross-cloud duplication per workload. This type of waste is usually tied to the cloud provider where the dev environment for that workload is. So it doesn't happen that often. Third, implementing tooling to identify the right SKUs and cost models. Tooling that does continuous auditing of existing resources, which allows for right sizing systems or helping you manage spot instances. It will make a huge difference, right? In addition, you need tools and processes in place that ask the right questions about the overall life cycle of the systems being provisioned. Asking the right questions in the beginning can help determine things like the right licensing model, or it may recommend options like spot instances, or in the case of long-lived systems, it may say, hey, you should look at doing reservations to decrease cost over the life of this system. If you're not thinking about the overall licensing and long-term commit costs, that's money down the drain. There are tools that can help you identify proper sizing for the performance that you want and can be incorporated as part of your provisioning and automation process. Fourth, control and limit data retention. Specifically, a big area where we see a problem is in non-production data retention. This is a big one. We see lots of extreme cases where very large data sets are completely duplicated multiple times for multiple lower environments when it's really just not needed.
Stephen, now what about multi-cloud strategies? Do you tend to see data replicated between clouds?
That's a good question too. We tend not to see data replicated between clouds because the data sets usually can be quite large, but this does bring up a good point though. When working with multi-cloud strategies where your data is hosted versus where the system that will be using the data plays a huge part in your ingress and egress network costs. If the data is in one cloud and your application servers that are going to be using that data is housed in another, you're going to see a greater cost just for accessing that data. That being said, data housed in a single cloud can still be problematic when you have too many copies. And this is made worse when you do things like use wrong storage tiers and you don't clean it up, or your retention's too long and you're replicating when you really don't need to. This can end up costing huge amounts of waste over time and in an exponential manner. Basically, no one ever thinks about cleaning that stuff up after the fact, and it grows and grows. This leads me to my fifth: cleanup of non-production environment. Cleanup of non-production environments, or the lack thereof, is huge waste. I've seen it multiple times where individuals have multiple copies of the same data, orphaned resources like disks or load balancers or storage locations that were part of a system, but they're not cleaned up properly when other parts were decommissioned. We also see systems where they've been running and they were spun up and forgot about for months or years, just, burning those Benjamins to light an unused portion of the factory. A common one we run across is that dev teams try to reuse resources instead of properly tearing down the old systems completely and then building new systems for new sprints. This is an old school mentality. But to be honest, it's partially brought on by things like, it was way too hard to get the system in the first place. Or, it took forever to get this. So I don't want to let it go because I might be able to use it for something else. This happens all over the place. Overall, the biggest takeaway is that in order to enable your dev teams to clean up their unused resource is this: you need to provide a system that allows for rapid provisioning and deprovisioning of systems that can be automated.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Now, what might make an organization hesitant to start a cloud optimization process? Lindsey?
What we see is that our customers are busy and the technology isn't slowing down. These are fast-moving environments, and prioritizing an optimization strategy takes time. They don't always know what the potential savings could be from an optimization. They don't always know if the juice is worth the squeeze.
Squeeze is the right word for sure. We always feel the pressure of the squeeze, whether it be money or time or resources. Get more stuff done for less. And oh, by the way, go faster. The big pushback in implementing systems that can help with costing and provisioning is there's a lot of overhead and time and cost to implement these properly. And these tool sets, with their automation, right? Organizations want to know up front if it's really going to be worth it, and if paying for the tools and the implementation, it makes the difference. Most of the time, they need a lower level cost analysis first to prove the value and justification for that expenditure.
So, what should an organization look for when it comes to finding a partner to help with cloud cost optimization?
It's really all about the partnership. Organizations should look for partners with multi-cloud expertise who use data to build an understanding of their business. For example, at Taos, our CSMs partner with our technologists, providing data analysis and voice of the customer. This has even earned us an NPS score of plus 82, which we all know is no small feat. The analysis leads to our technical folks being able to advise on recommendations. Organizations need to have initial assessments and recommendations, but then also ongoing support to optimize through changes. Part of the reticence to do this is the lack of understanding, but also using their own teams to assess. For leaders with competing priorities like cost versus performance, how do you get your resources to redirect to do these things? Taos can help because we can do this for you.
A lot of people can do the analysis, but you need someone that can help you act on it. Most vendors only align with their own products. You need somebody that can be agnostic to vendors with experience across multiple products and multiple clouds that can not only do the discovery and help you identify the overages and the cost, but then help you implement fixes to be more proactive. Taos can definitely help you with that.
Right on, Stephen. In fact, to help our customers do that, we have a whole spectrum of offerings, right? We help our customers plan, build, and run their environment. So we start with our cloud advisory services, which can highlight the areas that the customers can help transform and the kind of benefits they can get if they were to transform. Our cloud cost optimization advisory, which is the topic of today's webinar, it helps you with that. It falls under the advisory service. Our transformation service, which is our professional services, helps customers build their environment, whether it be migrate to the cloud or run more efficiently in the cloud or find the right backup procedures, resilience in the cloud. We can help them truly transform their environments. And the optimization services are managed services, which helps our customers run in an optimized manner and continuously keep finding improvements in their processes and run very efficiently. And all the three service offerings are tied together through our time-tested navigator methodology, which allows you to get predictable outcomes. So we've done this for, as I mentioned earlier, over 4,000 customers, and we can help more customers, especially given our journey as part of an IBM family company now.
Excellent. And I'm really excited because Taos has a special offer for attendees on the event today. Bharat, what can you tell us about it?
Sure. As you look at different companies and where they are in the cloud journey, cloud adoption journey, we have put together an offer for today's attendees around their cloud cost maturity. We can come in, sit with your team, our experts, working with your team for a 4-hour period. We can give you some hints at what kind of resources and governance you have in place. Where are you on the maturity curve? What is your tools, processes? Where are you on that curve and ownership, as well as find and identify some gaps around your cloud cost maturity? Because some companies are good at it, some companies not so good at it. We can give you some pointers, which will hopefully allow you to understand the expertise that Taos brings to the table and allows Taos to give you some tips which will help you on your journey to save more in the cloud so you can innovate faster. You can see the phone number below, 1-888-826-7686, or you can go to the web address above it for more information.
This is a really valuable offer. I know it could help a lot of companies on the event today. Thank you so much to our experts from Taos. And it's now time for our Q&A session. We encourage your questions, and let's go to Q&A. All right, excellent discussion, and thank you so much. I've now brought back in our experts here from Taos, Lindsey, Stephen, and Bharat. It's time to kick off Q&A. We've gotten tons of great questions coming in here during the discussion, and we appreciate those questions. Of course, if you have a question for our experts from Taos, now's the time to get it in. I'll go ahead and just start with this first question. This one is for Stephen. And Stephen, they are asking, do you have tools you'd recommend, or do you use cloud native tools?
We tend to be agnostic when it comes to the tooling. We find that a lot of places usually have some kind of tooling in place, whether it's the absolute correct one or whatever. They always have something of some kind, or they're leveraging or trying to leverage the built-in cloud tools. And we don't immediately come in and start telling you, hey, you got to swap this whole system out and whatnot. What we really do is we sit down and take a look at what you're trying to go for and look at the tools that you currently have and see how we can make those tools happen. And if there's a gap, we can say, hey, there's a gap here. And if need be, help the client do a bake-off on a couple suggested products that can help that, whether it's the cloud native tools or third-party tools that can span multiple clouds. So do we have a list? Not necessarily, but we've worked with quite a few of the different tool sets out there. We have our favorites, but we're not biased to them.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Using the right tool for the job, very smart. Next question here for Bharat. They're asking, what's the easiest way to understand where cloud waste is coming from?
Yeah, so I think like any project, you need a plan in place, right? And the first step is to understand where the problem is originating from. I would say start with the assessment, do a thorough assessment of where your spend is, analyze each of your bills, if you will, your cloud bills, what are the processes you have in place. And, we have a service for cloud as cost optimization assessment. We can have our experts come in and do that for you. You can also get started with first finding out where you are on the maturity curve by signing up for the free offer that we have as part of this webcast. That'll help our customers or prospects also understand, not only get free tips, but also understand the level of expertise from Taos they'll be working with.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great offer. I'm excited about that. I know that could help a lot of companies out there. Next question. This one's back to you, Stephen. They want to know, how long after a cost optimization initiative will we start seeing ROI?
Yeah, the answer to that is always, it depends, right? But to be honest, it's how fast can you implement, right? We'll come in, we'll help you identify, but it's really about the existing change management and how fast your and agile your environment is to actually implement the changes. Once you start implementing the changes, you'll start seeing that ROI immediately, right? We've seen dramatic changes and come in and did a cost assessment, and within 30 days we're like, yeah, you're on target to save a couple million in a year. It happens pretty quick.
That's impressive. Very impressive. Let's see. Another question here. They're asking, Kenneth is asking, I think this one's for you, Stephen. He wants to know, or sorry, he says, we have multiple dev or QA groups that each use cloud accounts. Our challenge is creating multiple subscriptions to enable us to track usage and costs across the groups. The result is duplication of instances. Do you have any recommendations on how to do this better?
Yeah, and Kenneth, this is something that we see all the time. This is a huge problem, and I kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier about multiple sprints and multiple dev tracks and stuff. Really, what it boils down to is process and um, monitoring of those systems. But here's the thing. What we found the most effective is help developing processes with like your enterprise architecture team that oversees the projects and stuff. So as new systems come in, part of their job should be to take a look a holistic overall view of all of the environments that you have out there in your dev tracks and basically say, hey, we've already got these systems spun up, can we reuse them, and if not, why, or should we look at targeting this? So but this is definitely a problem, and sometimes there is no fixed in certain areas, but shared resources, somebody looking at the bigger picture and all of the different dev tracks are the number one thing that we see that helps that problem. So, but absolutely, this is a problem.
Excellent. Another question here. This one's for you, Bharat. Bradford wants to know: is the cloud cost maturity assessment a numerical scale?
Yeah, we can help you benchmark against some of the best practices we have seen in the market, where we have customers who have the right processes in place. Yeah, we will leave you with a number which will tell you where you are on the maturity curve. Absolutely.
I like
Good
that.
one.
I like that kind of grading model. And then also on the cloud maturity assessment there, the question is: does Taos provide a list of priorities for eliminating cloud waste following the assessment? Low hanging fruit, the cheapest, the biggest bang for the buck.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we'll do in the assessment is find out where your opportunities exist, right, in terms of saving money, and then work with you on what are the areas you can get started with. It is a time-based recommendation based on which are the ones where you can get the maximum bang for the buck, as Bradford mentioned. We can absolutely do that and paint a timeline for you on when you will reach that level of maturity you want to reach while saving money, and then what are the steps you need to put in place to keep that ongoing. So it's a list of recommendations prioritized by dollar as well as effort required.
Okay. And you may have answered this, but the follow-on question here is: if there's an approved budget, are you able to make recommendations given that dollar amount?
I mean, approved budget for the cloud, right? So if your cloud spend, if you're trying to hit a certain target given your workloads, yes, we can absolutely work with you to identify areas where you are not using for the spend, or you're not getting the value for the spend, or you're making in the cloud. But within the budget, we can give you options, but after you have to make sure the budget has to be allocated appropriately, right? Depending on what your needs are on the production as well as development side.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. Lindsay, here's a question from you for you from Chris, who wants to know: does the cloud cost optimization take into account hybrid environments?
It's a good question. Most of our clients that we see do have hybrid environments. So of course it does. From a technical perspective, though, I'm wondering, Steve, if you have any sort of insight that you'd like to provide.
Um, Yes, obviously, when we're talking about the hybrid environment for on-prem and in the cloud, there are a lot of different tool sets depending on your cloud provider that we look at leveraging too, that allows you to turn around and take some of the tools that are based in the cloud and turn around and deploy them into your on-prem environment to help kind of track those costs and just overall usage of some of your on-prem. It's not perfect, and like I said before in previous, quantifying the cost of on-prem versus the cloud, it's a lot harder, right? So those hybrid environments can get a little bit tricky, and the spend and between on-prem and cloud, it really boils down to what your current costing model is for your hybrid on-prem versus using the cloud and coming up with a cohesive strategy on how to combine those two costs.
Got it. Okay. And then, Stephen, here's another question for you as well. They want to know, is Taos able to analyze many localized configurations and provide recommendations for combining or reducing resources?
Absolutely. Part of our initial look is for things that are duplicated or redundancy and stuff. That one is tends to be a low hanging fruit for us. So we tend to zero in on those things and say, hey, look, all of these resources here that you've got duplicated 3 or 4 times for these separate environments and stuff, you could centralize some of this stuff and hopefully drive your costs down, right? So we tend to take a holistic, overall, big picture view of your entire environment. I mean, a lot of times the individual teams or business units put blinders on, right? Our job is to come in and look at it with no blinders and see the overall picture. So absolutely, that is one of the areas that we concentrate on our initial investigation and discovery.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time here in our webinar schedule. One final question I want to ask you, Lindsey, is, if folks are challenged out there with their cloud spending and, cloud waste and multi-cloud, what should they do to get started?
I think it's a good idea to have an assessment, right? It's complicated as we talked about, and it can help a lot, I think, to get the lay of the land, and understand what's going on before you kind of know action items, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if folks go to the handouts tab, they will find a link there to get started with Taos. And it's there that they'll find additional information on signing up for the cloud maturity cost assessment. Is that right, Bharat?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the link to follow, and there is more information. Once again, sign up for the assessment. It'll or the maturity assessment will come in. We'll talk to you. You'll get a flare of some of the questions you were asking on the chat today. You can ask more, and we can answer them, and you can meet some of our experts in both technology and finance to help get a better picture.
Awesome.
You know,
All right. Well,
the
this has been a great discussion. Sorry?
I was just going to add one thing. There's, with that free assessment and stuff, the big part of that is, you don't know what you don't know. And I just want to point out a lot of times asking questions that you don't realize you should be asking. That's one of the things that we come in and do. And that by itself goes, hey, you know what? We didn't even think about that. That's one part that definitely that initial assessment, we start asking questions that people didn't even realize that they should have been asking to begin with. That helps identify areas that they need to concentrate right off the bat. So I did want to put that out there. The assessment does help in that it at least helps you know what you don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. We all need to, do a little bit more analysis on what's going on with the cloud. I guess one more question before we go that just came in here from Ned. He's asking, are any of the cloud platforms more tedious than others when it comes to providing a cost analysis to the customer? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that. And my answer to that would be no, they're all tedious. They're all equally tedious of pulling numbers out of there. So here's the thing, their job is to drive costs, right? So they don't want to make it as easy for you to quantify it down to the second and be really agile and tear stuff down. They try to make it, they're hoping you forget about this stuff. They want you to spin stuff up and walk away for 50 years. So they're all a little bit tedious to get the numbers out in the way you want and be able to quantify those and extract it and pull it back and do bill back and all of those things. It's there, but they don't put it on a platter for you. So they're all equally hard.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like the services from Taos could really help a lot of companies out there to better optimize their cloud spend and stop the waste that's happening and save money. So this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate our expert presenters joining us on the event today, Stephen, Lindsey, and Bharat. Thank you so much for being on. And thank you to our friends over at Taos for supporting the event today. Go check out the handouts tab right there. There's a link to taos.com for additional information, and watch your email inbox for additional information about the services from Taos. Before we go, I do want to announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card prize. This is going to Anthony Gosser from Michigan. Congratulations. And we will reach out to you to deliver that gift card. And of course, we'll reach out to our best question prize winner as well. Thank you so much for all the great questions. And I hope that you enjoyed the event, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye bye.